In the winter, under dark and cloudy skies, beneath the cool waters of the Seymour River, new life begins. It bursts forth from pearl-sized bright red eggs buried beneath the gravel on the riverbed. Protected by surrounding rocks, tiny salmon fry dart and grow, soon to begin a journey that may take them 12,000 kilometers through the North Pacific Ocean before they return to spawn and die in the Seymour River. The mysterious life cycle of the beautiful salmon of British Columbia has always challenged human imagination and understanding. Where do they go, and why? How do they find their way back to the river of their birth? Are salmon an endangered species? During the next few minutes, let's look for answers to these and other questions as we take a journey of our own into the Seymour River watershed. We'll see how delicate the salmon environment is and how carefully it must be managed. And we'll see how a few dedicated professionals and many volunteers join forces at the Seymour Hatchery to make sure that the future generations of salmon are preserved. The Seymour Hatchery is located in North Vancouver's Seymour Demonstration Forest, which covers 5,200 hectares of land below the Seymour Falls Dam. Domestic drinking water is stored behind the dam. The Seymour is one of 3 reservoirs that supplies water to the thirsty public of the Lower Mainland. The Seymour Demonstration Forest is managed carefully, taking all resources such as fish, forestry, wildlife, water, and recreation into account. Thousands of people visit the Seymour Demonstration Forest every year and learn about these resources and how they are managed. The Seymour Salmonid Society was formed in 1987 and contracted with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to redevelop and operate the hatchery on the Seymour River just downstream from the dam. A wilderness setting on the doorstep of a major urban center makes this project unique. Another objective of the Society is to increase public awareness of the fisheries resource through organized tours, literature, signs, and school field trips. Since fish enhancement is not limited to just a hatchery, the Society works closely with other government agencies to preserve, enhance, or create habitat for the wild fish living in the Seymour River. At the Seymour Hatchery, staff and volunteers raise coho, chum, pink, and Chinook salmon, as well as steelhead and cutthroat trout. Raising fish in a safe and stable environment increases survival dramatically. All the fish raised at the hatchery are eventually released into the wild, where they will have to fend for themselves for a portion of their lives. These make up for the fish taken by the commercial and sports fisheries, or lost to pollution, poor water conditions, as well as habitat damage or destruction.
Okay, we're going on a special field trip to see what happens in and around the Seymour Hatchery. We're very lucky. We're going to be able to see a whole year's activities during this one visit.
Where are we? This doesn't look like a hatchery.
This is a large pool in the Seymour River, about 1/2 kilometer downstream from the hatchery. Every summer and fall, some coho salmon gather here before they find a place to spawn. Sometimes steelhead, cutthroat, and chinook are found here as well. Chum and pink salmon adults tend to spawn in the lower part of the river, closer to the ocean.
What are those people doing?
They're going to try to capture the fish in this pool using a long seine net. The bottom of the net is weighted so that it drags along the bottom so the fish can't swim underneath. It's called the lead line. The top has floats so that the whole net doesn't sink. What do you think they call the top line?
The float line?
Very good.
What's that person doing out there in the water?
He's making sure the lead line doesn't get caught on anything. If it does, he'll have to dive down and free the net.
I bet he's cold.
He'd be even colder if he wasn't wearing that dry suit. Now they're bringing the net up to shore, very carefully so the fish won't escape.
What will they do with them?
They're going to mark the coho by putting a hole punch in the left gill plate.
Why?
Well, once they mark the fish, it'll be released. The staff will look at these marks after the fish has spawned and died.
What else are they looking for?
They're looking for ventral fins. If one of those ventral fins is missing, they know the fish came from the hatchery. Every coho raised at the Seymour Hatchery has one of its ventral fins removed before it's released, kind of like giving it a name tag.
Doesn't that hurt?
Probably, but it's very important to know how many hatchery fish are returning.
Wow, what's that?
It's huge.
No kidding. That's a male Chinook. There aren't very many of those in the Seymour River. That's why the hatchery has to get eggs from other hatcheries and transport them to the Seymour. By releasing the fish into the river, it's hoped that more adults will return and spawn. This is how they build up a small run of fish, but it takes time. This Chinook could be 4 to 6 years old.
Aren't there any steelhead or cutthroat in there?
There are far fewer steelhead and cutthroat in this river, but the chance of catching one is always there. In fact, once we had 26 steelhead and over 500 coho in one seining.
What's that?
Those coho are going back to the hatchery to be spawned artificially. They'll float them across the river in that net pen and transport them back to the hatchery in a holding tank on the back of a trike.
Hey, we've moved. What's going on here?
This is a fence trap set up in a small creek supplied by the outflow of water from the hatchery. As the adult coho, Chinook, and steelhead look for a place to spawn, they may check out this creek and end up in the trap. Do you see the small V opening?
Yes.
Well, the fish swim up the creek until they hit the fence. Since fish are used to getting around barriers or tough spots, they keep trying and eventually they find the V opening. Once they're in the trap, they rarely get out.
What happens to them?
Every morning, the staff checks the trap. The fish are checked for missing fins, that hole punch in the left gill plate, and whether they are male or female.
Can they tell the difference?
As male salmon mature and get ready to spawn, they form a hooked nose. They may also form a hump on their backs. In certain species like pink salmon, the male develops a very large hump. That's why some people call them humpies. All males remain quite thin as they mature, but females get fat with eggs. You'll probably notice color differences between different species and between males and females of the same species. You can see here that they're sorting fish and keeping some to spawn. It's important to keep accurate records of every fish that's handled.
Hey, that fish looks dead. What happened?
All of the fall spawning salmon die after they spawn. The dead fish are sampled for length, and the scales are taken to determine the age of the fish.
How can you tell age from a scale?
The scales are from each species of the fish are different, but all have rings on them like a tree. These calcium rings are deposited as the fish grows. When the rings are close together, this indicates a period of slow growth, usually during the winter when the water is cold and there's less food around. Faster growth usually occurs during the summer, when the water is warm and food is plentiful. So people can look at a scale under a microscope and count how many winters and summers the fishes live through. They also indicate the change from fresh to salt water.
Cool. Where are we now?
It's time to take eggs from some of the ripe female coho and fertilize them with the milk from the males. These females have been moved up from the trap into this holding raceway. Here they check the females to make sure they are ripe.
What does ripe mean?
The eggs have to be loose inside the female before they are ready to be fertilized, sort of like a bag of marbles. If the female feels hard like a green tomato, the eggs are not yet mature and can't be fertilized.
Are they going to get the eggs out of that fish?
Yes, if she wasn't ready, they would put her back in the raceway and check her again in a few days.
How will they take the eggs out?
Remember that all the fall spawning salmon die after spawning. Well, here they'll kill the fish just before they take the eggs. They cut her open with a special knife. See how they just drop out? All the equipment has to be dry so that the eggs don't come in contact with water before fertilization.
Why?
The eggs would immediately begin to absorb water, which will close the opening where the sperm enters the egg. If the opening is closed, the egg can't be fertilized.
So, you couldn't do this in the rain, right?
Right. You would have to find a dry place.
How many eggs did she have?
That female probably had 1,500 to 2,000 eggs. Some of the bigger salmon, like Chinook, have up to 6,000 eggs.
What are they doing with the eggs now?
They'll be kept cool and dry while the milt is being collected from the male.
What will they do with those fish?
They'll put them back in the river for animals to eat. Black bears especially love an easy meal. Here, we're back at the Hurry Creek holding pens. This is where the male coho are being held. They're checking to make sure the males are producing the thick white liquid called milt before they use them.
Males have to be ripe too?
That's right.
Why do they dry the fish off?
They want to make sure that the water doesn't get mixed in with the milt. Once the sperm in the milt comes in contact with water, they begin to swim. If they start to swim too early, they'll be tired before reaching the eggs.
Is that the milt?
Yes, it's collected in a little bag and kept cool until needed.
Will bears eat these fish too?
Yes, they tend to be big eaters. Other animals, raccoons, otter, and mink, might also have a fish feed.
What happens next?
It's time to put the eggs and milt together. Here they're mixing milt in with the eggs. Now they add water to get the sperm swimming towards the eggs. Only one sperm will fertilize each egg. It takes only about 15 to 30 seconds. Notice the foam on the water. This is a very good indication that the sperm is swimming vigorously. The eggs are also absorbing water right now. This makes them sticky. In the wild, this helps them to stick to the gravel spawning bed or rad and prevents them from being swept away in the current.
Now what happens?
The eggs are placed in an incubator where they'll be left undisturbed until they reach the eyed stage. That's the stage of development when you can actually see the eyes of the fish inside the egg. They look like little happy faces. Now they can be handled without much risk of harming them.
How long does it take to reach the eyed stage?
Well, it all depends on the water temperature. As the water in this hatchery is quite cold during the winter, it might take a month or more.
Why are they taking some of the eggs out?
Those white eggs are dead, and if they were left, fungus or bacteria might grow on them and contaminate the live eggs. The live eggs are then counted. This is called egg enumeration.
Is he going to count every egg?
No, that would take too long. He's going to take 3 small samples and count how many eggs there are in each sample. Then he measures the water displaced by all the eggs. Then he can estimate how many eggs are in each tray. This tray contains almost 2,000 eggs.
I'm glad he didn't have to count every one.
No kidding.
Wow, look at all those eggs.
Hey, look! Some of them are coming out of their shell.
These are pink salmon eggs hatching. They're called alevin.
They look like tiny fish with a big belly.
That's the yolk sac, and it feeds the alevin while they develop into fry. Once it's used, it's time to take them out of the incubator, as they need food.
Have these fish used their yolk sac?
Yes, these are coho fry. Remember the eggs they took out of those adult coho last fall?
Yes.
Now it's late winter, and it's time to take the fry out of the incubator tray and begin feeding them.
What are those plastic things?
They're called biorings. They put them in the tray so the alevin has something to lean up against while they're developing.
What's that bucket for?
This is a way of keeping the young fish together, so it's easier to feed them. They also help each other identify food, especially the artificial kind.
What are they fit?
They start out on baby food for fish. It's a nice soft powder made mostly of ground up fish, oil, vitamins, and minerals.
Yuck, it stinks.
You're right there. When the fish are really small, they have to be fed every half hour.
That's a lot of work.
Good thing there are many volunteers at the hatchery to help with everything. Luckily, as the fish grow, they don't have to be fed as often.
Hey, we've moved again.
Is this the Seymour River?
What's that guy fishing for?
Yes, we're still on the Seymour, and this is one of our volunteer anglers. He's fishing for steelhead. There are so few in the river they angle for them as well as using the big seine net. If this angler catches a steelhead, he'll put it into a flow-through holding tube that sits in the river until the staff can transport it to the hatchery.
How?
They bring a pack with a plastic bag inside. They fill the bag with water and put the fish in there. Then they hike to the truck with the fish in the pack. There's a transport tank on the back of the truck. Once at the hatchery, the fish is put into a pond until it's ready to spawn.
Do all types of fish spawn at the same time?
No, steelhead and cutthroat are late winter or spring spawners. So while all the baby coho, chinook, pink, and chum are being taken out of the incubators, it's time to take the eggs from the female steelhead and cutthroat. These steelhead are being checked for ripeness. Remember what that means?
Yes. The females have to feel like a bag of marbles and the males have to produce milk.
Are they going to kill them before they take the eggs?
No, these trout may survive to spawn more than once.
Is that a female steelhead?
Yes. To get the eggs out, they put the female to sleep with carbon dioxide gas bubbled into the water. Once she's asleep, she's dried off and oxygen is put into her body through a needle to force the eggs out. See? They barely have to work at it.
How many eggs do you think there are?
Probably 3,500 to 4,000 eggs. Milk is taken from the males, just as you saw with the coho. The fertilization and incubation process is exactly the same. When these fry are ready to be put into a floating bucket, they're really small.
Get out the baby food!
This female cutthroat is not ready to spawn.
They're old fish. You see, they're not nearly as fat.
This male is ripe.
Here, he's got some milk there, so we know that we're okay when they go to school.
Hey, it's a Seymour water slide.
Are those fish dead?
No, these fish are being put to sleep with carbon dioxide gas, just like that female steelhead they spawned.
Why are they putting the fish to sleep?
Well, it's time to clip off one of their fins. Remember earlier when they looked for a missing ventral fin on the adult coho?
Yes?
Well, this is how they clip that fin off. These fish happen to be summer-run steelheads, so they get a special clip. Their adipose fin is clipped. That's the small one on their back, close to the tail. Their left maxillary bone also comes off. That's the bone that looks like the fish's mustache.
That sure looks like a lot of work.
It sure is. Each fish has to be handled one at a time. Every year, 60,000 coho, 30,000 steelhead, and 1,000 cutthroat are marked in this way. Thank goodness for those volunteers. Look, they start the volunteers off young.
What about the chinook, chum, and pink? Don't they get clipped?
Chinook only get marked some years when the Department of Fisheries and Ocean wants additional information. Pink and chum are very small when they migrate to the ocean. They would be hard to clip.
How long does it take for them to wake up?
Only a few minutes.
When do they get clipped?
When they outgrow the rearing troughs and have to be moved to the outside ponds. These steelhead will spend about 1.5 years in these ponds until it's time to release them into the wild. Coho are placed in the outside ponds for about 8 to 9 months before they're released.
Look, it's breakfast time.
Boy, are they hungry.
Steelhead are always hungry. Well, it's been 2 years since these steelhead were spawned. It's time for the smolts to go to the ocean and fend for themselves. The free ride is almost over. Before they release them, hatchery volunteers will examine them a final time. Here, the smolts are put to sleep again and measured for length and weight. Notice they're also checking to make sure that they can recognize the clip.
They're big when you see them up close.
How are they released?
The steelhead are gathered with a seine net, then weighed. Then they are transported to the mouth of the river to be released.
Why weigh them?
Only so many fish can fit into the tank. If they put too many in, they get stressed out. So you see the oxygen bottle near the tank?
That big red thing?
Right. That puts the oxygen through the air stone into the water, so the fish have enough oxygen during the trip. Okay, we've made it down to the river. It's time to attach another Seymour water slide to the tank and release the fish.
Will they go straight to the ocean?
Most will. Some may stick around for a while. Some may never leave. Do you know what they call a steelhead that never went to the ocean?
A rainbow trout?
Right.
There they go. Good luck. Hope to see you in a few years.
Fish enhancement goes beyond producing fish at the hatchery. Protecting and creating habitat for the wild fish is also essential. Where a forest and stream meet, numerous interactions exist, including the land, the stream, wildlife, and vegetation. The interaction of these features determine the types of habitat available.
What's a habitat?
A habitat is where something lives.
So, a stream would be a fish habitat, right?
Yes, fish habitat includes a combination of some or all of the components mentioned earlier. In fact, the components of fish habitat change throughout their life cycle. Adults seek out gravel in which to spawn. This is spawning habitat. These areas later provide habitat for the developing eggs and alevin, which require protection from the sun, predators, and fast water currents.
What do wild fish eat?
Juvenile and adult fish eat insects that live in the water. Streamside vegetation provides food as terrestrial insects may fall from overhanging branches. Adult cutthroat and dolly varden char are often known to eat young salmon or trout fry. Vegetation also provides shade, protection from predators, and helps to stabilize the stream banks. Without plants, the banks could collapse and water running off the land would carry a lot of silt into the stream. Silt accumulation can smother eggs and alevin in the gravel. Young fish will spend most of their time in the slower-moving areas of the river and the tributaries, especially during the winter and spring. At these times, heavy precipitation raises water levels.
Is there enough food for everyone?
The amount of food and shelter in a stream habitat does limit the number of fish that can live there. To reduce competition, the fish spread out, and the most aggressive fish get the best locations. Pink and chum leave the Seymour River after a few weeks, so they don't have to share with everyone else. Chinooks stay for a few months, while coho, steelhead, and cutthroat stay for 1 to 3 years. The successive seaward migration also reduces competition in the estuary and ocean areas.
Can people make more habitat?
Yes, in fact, the Seymour Salmonid Society is working with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Greater Vancouver Regional District, and the Provincial Ministry of Environment, Lands and Parks to create and enhance juvenile habitat.
Junior Creek, a small Seymour tributary near the hatchery, has been partially diverted into another intermittent tributary, Creek 2, which has been modified and provides protective pool and riffle habitat for juvenile salmonids during their residence in fresh water. Adult coho have been sighted here, and it is hoped that with the addition of gravel, natural spawning will occur. In 1993, 17,000 hatchery coho fry were released into this new stream. Perhaps some of them will return as adults to spawn here. The Seymour Salmonid Society also wants to build artificial spawning channels and add spawning gravel to the river and tributaries to improve and increase spawning habitat. This would increase natural, wild spawning, which is generally preferred. A single small stream may appear insignificant as a producer of wild fish, but there are thousands of small streams in British Columbia that account for substantial fish production. Healthy streams are valuable and fragile. They can easily be damaged by poor logging practices, pollution, and by the growth of cities and towns. Small streams are vital to fish and must be preserved.
What are all those kids doing here?
They're participating in a program called Gently Down the Stream, developed by the Seymour River Hatchery and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Salmonid Enhancement Program. Through a combination of classroom projects and a day-long visit to the Seymour Hatchery, a class of local students can learn about fish and their relationship with the environment of Seymour River Valley.
What can the kids do?
By looking closely at a stream, this group of students will measure and describe many of the features that make up a stream habitat. They're going to study water flow, depth, and quality, as well as bottom and bank composition. They'll also note the presence of logs, streamside vegetation, and the presence of insects and fish. This stream area has a variety of water depths and flows and is quite sheltered from the sun. The root wad alters the stream flow, which affects the shape of the stream bed. It also provides fish with protection from predators like raccoons and herons. Aquatic insects may live amongst those rocks, and as the water cascades over the rocks, oxygen dissolves into it. Providing the quality of water is high, this area looks like a good stream habitat. Think about these things the next time you visit the streams in your neighborhood.
That was neat. What's next?
How about a game?
Okay.
Here the students learn about forest ecology. The many relationships between living and non-living components of the forest are discussed during a game involving questions and clues. It's a fun way to learn about the forest around us.
Wow, forests and rivers are great. Ouch! There are sure a lot of mosquitoes around here. Where do they all come from, anyhow?
Mosquitoes and many other insects begin their lives in the water. This small stream is home to thousands of aquatic insects of different species, and the young salmon and trout love to eat them.
Where are the fish?
They may be hiding in the shadow of overhanging branches or near the rocks in faster water. This is how they collect samples of insects from a stream.
What are they doing with that mucky water?
By taking a close look at the stream sample, the students will determine which types of aquatic insects are present in that particular stream area. The presence or absence of certain insects indicates the health of the stream. A healthy stream may contain a variety of insects, some of which cannot tolerate pollution. Polluted or unhealthy streams contain only the most tolerant and tough insects, or maybe no insects at all. This stream sample contains mayfly and stonefly nymphs, caddisfly larvae, water striders, and water mites.
I guess fish couldn't live in a stream without insects.
That's right. Here the students are given a tour of the whole facility. They learn how the hatchery operates and about the life cycles of the fish that live in the Seymour River.
What's the group leader explaining now?
He's explaining how they catch coho in the trap. Remember, we talked about that earlier.
Oh, yeah. What about the other species?
Well, the cutthroat in the Seymour grow to a maximum of a couple of pounds, so they could easily squeeze through the bars. Chum and pink salmon don't migrate this far up the river. We are 19 kilometers away from the ocean, and there's a rough canyon in between.
What are those big boxes?
Those are called bulk incubators, and they can put up to 200,000 eggs in one box. They're used to incubate pink and chum salmon eggs.
That's a lot of eggs.
The students are now going to learn about rearing fish in these troughs and in the outside rearing channels.
They're learning all the things that we've just learned on our tour.
That's right. Only we were lucky enough to see all the different stages of the fish at the hatchery, from collecting adults to releasing smolts in the wild.
Although the Seymour Hatchery is open to the public 7 days a week, its location in the Seymour Demonstration Forest limits general public access. The hatchery hosts 2 open houses each year, giving the community the chance to visit the site by bus during the trout spawning season in the spring and the salmon season in the fall. On arrival, visitors can enjoy informative tours and a tasty barbecue lunch. During the fall event, families are encouraged to bicycle to the hatchery along the 11-kilometer paved road through the demonstration forest. This route is very popular with cyclists, many of whom visit on weekends through the year. These open house events introduce the facility to many people who might otherwise never experience it. What you have seen here today is a program of conservation, revitalization, and environment management that is vital to the future survival of one of your most precious and useful resources. You have seen a few dedicated professionals at work operating a salmon hatchery, rearing, feeding, and releasing salmon fry, keeping valuable records, and protecting the natural habitat in the Seymour River watershed throughout. You have seen them working shoulder to shoulder with volunteers from the community who share a deep sense of responsibility for preserving and protecting the future for generations to come. It is a wonderful work and a huge task that the professionals could never accomplish on their own. Working on projects around the hatchery is a rewarding experience for every volunteer. In many ways, it is an educational experience, whether you are simply curious about salmon enhancement or thinking more seriously about it as a career opportunity. In either case, every volunteer comes face to face with a personal challenge. At the beginning, we mentioned how the mysterious life cycle of the beautiful salmon has challenged human understanding and imagination. Where do salmon go and why? And how do they find their way back to the river of their birth? Maybe someday someone will solve these and other tantalizing mysteries. Maybe it will be you.